you look at, or 500 years, because it's never going away.
Okay.
Once it's in that recorded deed, it's in there forevermore. It's just no longer enforceable. Like the recording of a judgment. After 10 years, still there for 100 years, you're going to go back and see that judgment. But after 10 years, it's just not enforceable. Anybody? Did I have another one? I'm sorry, another question? Okay, now, in addition, a type of, these words are weird. Restrictions, covenants, conditions, they all pretty much mean the same thing. Pretty much. I'm not going to hold you responsible to understand the difference between the three, because most people who use the terms don't have a clue what the differences are. You can put an affirmative covenant in a deed. The type of restrictions we just talked about are negatives. You may not do the following with this piece of property. You can put in a deed, you must do the following with this piece of property. You must erect a fence. You must build a building. You must pay assessments to the homeowners association. You may not use a swimming pool between 8 and 9 o'clock. You can put, or you may use a swimming pool between 8 and 9 o'clock. You can, the point is, restrictions imply negative. Covenants require agreements of the buyer to do, but they're all provisions in a deed called deed restrictions. Now, the materials then talk about, and this is just wrong, that bylaws of planned communities create a bunch of restrictions. That's not how we do it in Florida. You remember declaration of condominium? We also have declarations of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. If I'm a developer and I own a bunch of land and I turn it into 100 lots, they're going to have townhouses on them, and I record, before I ever deed property to anybody, I record something called a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And that's the catch-all for whatever type these things are, they're going to be in here. And these are all the things about, there's going to be an association, and it's going to levy assessments against you, and you may only have dogs up to 20 pounds, and you may not have more than 4 children, and you can't park trucks in the front yard, and you may or may not be able to have aluminum foil on your windows, or an American flag on your window. These are all contained in a document called a Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Now, these are planned communities. These are PUDs, planned unit developments. And you record one of these documents before you record the first deed. It's not a condominium, of course, but it uses that word declaration, and it contains a lot of the crud condos have, you know, rules, regulations, assessments, common properties, common maintenance, all that stuff is in there. And in your deed, rather than putting all of that crud in your deed, developer deeds it to buyer, subject to conditions set forth in that certain declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions recorded in book and page, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then the buyer is subject to everything in there. And the association, and its right to levy. And you can't paint your house purple, and you can't, all this stuff is in there. And then that's in there forever. And when it gets deeded from B to C and C to D, each guy puts it in there. And even if each guy doesn't put it in there, it's on there, because it's already recorded. You take title of that piece of property, you take title subject to it. So, you can put simple restrictions in a deed, or you can put a lot of restrictions in a deed, or you can just go record a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions before you deed the property, and then you deed it, and you just refer to it. Mention it in the deed and it's on there. Now, The material wants to now talk about how do you terminate them. Well, once that's done, if it's a simple restriction in a deed from A to B that says there shall be no pig farms on this property, well, they can get together and sign a document and say it's released. That's pretty easy. But once you do one of these declarations for a community with 100 people in it, it's pretty hard to get rid of it. All 100 people have to sign and agree. So they're hard to get rid of. But the materials want to talk about termination. They mention one other concept, and I'm not going to get into it at any length, except that sometimes restrictions become stale. They become so old. You'll find restrictions in downtown Miami that say there shall never be an office building on this corner. But they were signed in 1902. We have statutes that eliminate restrictions after a period of time. We have a statute called MARTA, MRTA. Sounds just like Atlanta's transit system MARTA, but without the A. MRTA, it's the Market Reputable Title Act. And its purpose is to eliminate stale restrictions. Real complicated. Okay. I would like to go through a discussion of deeds now and look at these deeds I sent you. However, I'm sensitive to anybody who wants to eat lunch. We'll go ahead and break for lunch if we need to. What do you want to do? Tell me. Lunch? Great. When we come back, we'll look at the deeds. All right.
Guys, punks.
Very punctually, I'm going to begin at 1:45 without fail. And we're going to go through, look at the deeds then.
Got 30 minutes.
You want breakfast?